Thank you very much, Leslie. Thank you, Ambassador, for sharing this wonderful space with us all, and to Nicholas and Tim, without whom none of this would happen. I thought, taking a leaf out of Leslie's book, I would be a little bit mixture of personal and professional. And you could say that diplomacy, in some ways, the rhythm of diplomacy is the rhythm of anniversaries. They give us opportunities to describe deeper things at play, but they also create very personal memories. So I'm going to go, like Leslie, back to the 70s, back to the Easter of 1978, when my father was the British naval attaché in the embassy, and the ambassador at the time was unable to attend the annual Will Adams Festival at Yokosuka. And so during my Easter holidays, for the very first time, my father represented the ambassador, and I represented my father, and laid a wreath and took part in a banquet and had a fantastic time. And then later that summer, we were able to go down in August to Ito, to the famous fireworks, but also celebration of Will Adams down in Ito as well. And as part of that celebration, many of you in this room will know, a young officer from the British Embassy, always a young man, would dress up as Will Adams and would hop into a little boat with wheels on it, and for about 2 hours in the midday sun in very heavy gear would stand in this boat and be rolled around the streets of Ito. And those two events made me think that diplomacy might be quite fun, and probably led me to look forward to a career in diplomacy. So I was going to just describe a little bit, as Nicholas suggested, how Japan400 looked like from a government perspective when these two gentlemen came up with the brilliant concept. And this concept really emerged in 2012, probably, was the kind of time you were coming up with it. And people, if you cast your mind back to 2012, you'll remember that that was the point in the autumn of 2012 when Shinzo Abe had just been re-elected as Prime Minister. And so when it came to historical commemorations, his enthusiasm was for the Choshu 5 and the 150th anniversary of the arrival of the Choshu 5 in the UK. And there were great attractions to that. It meant, from a British government perspective, that we would be celebrating Japan coming out of itself and visiting the rest of the world. We'd be celebrating the beginning of an era of friendship that would be lasting many decades, and we would be celebrating places like Yamaguchi-ken. And so the attractions of that, compared to the suggestions from Nicholas and Tim, that we focused instead on a period that was going to last us just 10 years. It was going to involve the British going to Japan rather than the Japanese coming the other way, and that wasn't flavour of the month with the incoming government, suggested that if we had to choose between the two, we ought to focus on the Choshu 5. And indeed, for the first few months of certainly my time as ambassador, the Choshu 5 was very much what we celebrated. But the great joy of relations between two countries is that governments aren't really in charge, and that if there's a really good idea that is flourishing at the grassroots level, it takes off and does brilliantly well. And of course that means that over the last 10 years, we were able to celebrate not just in 2013, but in 2014 and 15 and 16 and 17, all the way through till here we are today. And it's provided a wonderful opportunity for people across the whole of the UK to learn about this extraordinary, as Leslie was saying, period in UK-Japan relations. It's allowed for some real new scholarship to take place, and we have learned things about that era. It's encouraged Tim to publish on the era and research on the era in ways that we might not have had otherwise. And it's meant a lot of fun as well for all of us. So I'm here to celebrate the triumph of grassroots over what governments themselves might have decided. Just to say a little bit about that very first year, 2013, we had lots of ideas to celebrate the arrival of the clove. And of course, one of the things you will all know was that famous letter from King James to Tokugawa Ieyasu, and the letter that Tokugawa Ieyasu wrote back talking about friendship and 10,000. Now, of course, what you discover is it wasn't really Tokugawa Ieyasu who wrote that, it was his translator, his interpreter, who may well have been someone who had an interest in Britain being flattered, or England being flattered. But it did mean that we were able to pick up those themes of collaboration. There was, in particular, the British were keen to show the Japanese at the time that we were technologically the most advanced, or one of the most advanced nations in Europe, and therefore a telescope was the present that we brought with us, that Cyrus brought with him. And of course, in the course of 2013, thanks to the hard work of many people, we were able to have a perfect replica of that telescope, the original gift, made in Wales, brought to Japan in the ambassador's residence. The current emperor was able to come to the residence and admire the telescope, and it then went on tour around Japan, and I think it's now in Sunpu Castle. So if any of you are interested, there is a chance for you to see it again. So all of that as a way of saying that these occasions, these celebrations, they're both interesting of themselves, they're emblematic of something bigger, and for me they're emblematic in particular of the triumph of enthusiasm over diplomatic wise heads. So let me just end by saying this has been what you might call a citizens' project. It's built all the way up from the grassroots. It was in some ways a great dress rehearsal for what happened when the Meiji Restoration happened and everything else. But above all, I would just like to bring real strong credit to Tim Screech and to Nicholas MacLean, without whom none of us would be in this room today. Thank you very much.